On Mother's Day, they gave me a card signed, "Thanks, Maid." The words burned into my soul like a branding iron pressed against raw skin. I never thought my own children could be so cruel. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Vivian, and I'm 72 years old. I live in a cramped apartment on the 4th floor of a brick building in Queens, New York. The elevator broke down 3 months ago, and nobody bothered to fix it. So every morning, I climb those stairs with my arthritic knees screaming in protest. My hands shake as I grip the banister. Painted green decades ago, and now chipped like my faith in family. The apartment smells like pine sol and disappointment. I've been cleaning obsessively for 50 years, thinking that if I just kept everything perfect, maybe they'd love me more. Maybe they'd see me as more than just the woman who scrubs their toilets and washes their dishes. The morning routine never changes. I wake up at 5:30 before the sun kisses the skyline of Manhattan in the distance. My first thought isn't about coffee or breakfast. It's about them. What do Emily and David need today? What mess will I have to clean up? What disappointment will they hand me wrapped in false smiles? That Mother's Day morning started like any other. I dragged my tired bones from the narrow bed that squeaks with every movement. The springs are shot, but I can't afford a new mattress. Not when I'm still sending David money for his rent in Brooklyn. Not when I'm paying for Emily's car insurance because she says she's between jobs. Again. I put on my worn house dress, the blue one with tiny flowers that used to be bright but now look faded like my hopes. My reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a woman I barely recognized. Gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. Dark circles under eyes that once sparkled with dreams. Lips pressed into a thin line from years of swallowing words I should have said. The kitchen counter held 3 coffee cups from the night before. Emily and David had come by for dinner, which meant I'd spent 6 hours cooking and cleaning while they sat on my couch complaining about their lives. The dishes sat there like silent accusations. Nobody offered to help wash them. They never do. I made my coffee extra strong that morning. Something in my chest felt heavy, like a storm was coming. The weather report on my old radio said it would be sunny and 75 degrees. Perfect for families to spend time together, to visit their mothers with flowers and gratitude. I allowed myself to imagine David bringing me roses, Emily taking me out for brunch at that little diner on Northern Boulevard, where they make pancakes thick as novels. But hope is a dangerous thing when you're already broken. The doorbell rang at exactly noon. I smoothed my dress and opened the door with the biggest smile I could manage. Emily stood there in her designer jeans and leather jacket that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. David slouched behind her, checking his phone like he had somewhere more important to be. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," Emily said, but her voice held no warmth. It was the tone you'd use with a stranger. They handed me an envelope. My heart leaped like a schoolgirl's. A card. They remembered. They cared enough to go to the store and pick something out special just for me. I tore open the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a generic card with a picture of flowers on the front. Nothing personal. Nothing that showed they thought about me specifically. But I was grateful anyway. Until I opened it. The printed message inside read, "To someone who keeps everything running smoothly." Already my stomach started to twist. But then I saw what they'd written underneath in David's messy handwriting. "Thanks, Maid. Love, your employers." Emily giggled. David smirked. They stood there waiting for my reaction like it was the funniest joke in the world. The card fell from my hands like a dead bird. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up so I could see their cruel words staring back at me. The room started spinning. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe properly. "What's wrong, Mom?" Emily asked, but she was still smiling. "Don't you think it's funny?" "Funny. They thought reducing me to hired help was funny. We figured it was honest," David added, scrolling through his phone. "I mean, that's basically what you do, right? Clean house, cook food, write checks when we need them." I looked around my small living room, at the photos covering every surface, pictures of them as babies, as children, as teenagers graduating high school, pictures of family vacations I'd paid for with my teacher's pension, pictures of Christmas mornings where they ripped through presents I'd stayed up all night wrapping. In every single photo, I was smiling, beaming with pride at my beautiful children, but they were looking at me now like I was nothing, less than nothing, an inconvenience they had to tolerate to get what they needed. The scent of my mother's rose perfume seemed to drift through the room. I kept her bottle on my dresser, even though she'd been gone 15 years. Sometimes when I felt most alone, I'd dab a little on my wrists and pretend she was still here to give me advice. She would have told me to stand up for myself. She would have told me I deserved better. But I said nothing. I just bent down and picked up the card with shaking hands. "Thanks for stopping by," I whispered. They exchanged a look. Emily shrugged. We're meeting friends for brunch in Manhattan. Happy Mother's Day, I guess? And they left, just like that. No hug, no, I love you. Nothing but the echo of their laughter in the hallway as the door clicked shut behind them. I stood there for 10 minutes, staring at that card, reading those words over and over until they burned themselves into my memory. Thanks, maid. As if 50 years of sacrifice meant nothing. As if raising them from babies to adults was just a job I got paid for. As if loving them unconditionally was just another service I provided. The silence in my apartment felt like death. Let me take you back to where this all began. Maybe you'll understand how I got to be a 72-year-old woman whose own children see her as disposable help. 52 years ago, I was Vivian Chen, a fourth-grade teacher at PS 163 in Jamaica, Queens. I loved those children like they were my own. I decorated my classroom with bright posters and always kept a jar of peppermints on my desk for kids who needed a little sweetness in their day. My students would hug my legs when they saw me in the grocery store on weekends. Their parents thanked me for caring about their futures. I had dreams then, big dreams. I wanted to become a principal someday, maybe even work for the Department of Education, creating programs to help struggling students. I took night classes at Queens College, working toward my master's degree in education administration. Then I met Robert at a church social. He was handsome in his army uniform, fresh back from Vietnam with stories that made him seem worldly and exciting. He had kind eyes and gentle hands. When he asked me to dance to The Way You Look Tonight, I felt like the heroine in a romantic movie. We married 6 months later. I was 26, and so in love, I could barely think straight. Robert got a job with the Parks Department, and we rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Elmhurst. For 2 years, we were happy. I kept teaching while he worked on maintaining city playgrounds and ball fields. We saved money for a house. We talked about having children and growing old together. Emily was born in 1975. The moment they placed her in my arms, everything changed. She was perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces of pure love with tiny fingers that wrapped around mine like she was afraid to let go. Those first few weeks, I couldn't stop staring at her. Robert would find me at 3 in the morning just watching her sleep, memorizing every expression that crossed her little face. But Emily was colicky. She cried for months, only settling when I held her and walked the floors of our apartment. I took maternity leave that stretched longer and longer. My principal at PS 163 was understanding at first, but after 4 months, she needed to hire a replacement. Take as long as you need, Robert said. I make enough to support us. So I turned in my lesson plans and my classroom keys. I kissed my students goodbye and promised myself it was temporary. Once Emily was older and sleeping through the night, I'd go back to teaching. This was just a pause, not an ending. David was born 18 months later. Irish twins, my mother called them. 2 babies who needed constant attention, constant feeding, constant love. The temporary pause stretched into years. By the time both children were in school, I'd been out of the classroom so long that the Department of Education had changed their requirements. I'd need to take recertification courses, update my credentials, start over almost from scratch. Why go through all that trouble? Robert asked one evening as we sat at our kitchen table paying bills. The kids still need you here. Who's going to pack their lunches and help with homework? Who's going to be here when they get sick? He was right. Emily and David did need me. And honestly, part of me loved being needed so completely. I loved making Halloween costumes from scratch and baking cupcakes for school parties. I loved being the mom who volunteered for every field trip and knew all the teachers by name. But late at night, when the children were asleep and Robert was snoring beside me, I'd lie awake thinking about the classroom I'd left behind. I wondered if my replacement cared as much about the quiet kids in the back row. I wondered if she kept peppermints in her desk drawer. Those wondering moments felt selfish, so I pushed them down deep where they couldn't hurt anyone. The children grew, and my world revolved around them completely. Soccer practice for David, piano lessons for Emily, parent-teacher conferences and science fair projects, birthday parties where I made elaborate cakes shaped like cartoon characters because I wanted everything to be perfect for them. Robert worked longer hours as the years passed. The Parks Department promoted him to supervisor, which meant more responsibility and more stress. He started stopping at Murphy's Pub on Northern Boulevard after work. Just for 1 beer, he said. 1 beer to unwind from the day. 1 beer became 3. 3 became however many it took to make him forget whatever was eating at him inside. By the time Emily was 8 and David was 6, Robert was drinking every night. Not falling down drunk, but different. Quieter. Meaner. "This house is a mess," he'd say, stepping over David's toy trucks. "What do you do all day?" I'd look around at the lived-in chaos of a home with 2 children. Backpacks by the door, art projects on the refrigerator, dishes from after-school snacks in the sink. To me, it looked like life. To Robert, it looked like failure. "I'll clean it up," I'd say, already mentally organizing which chore to tackle first. "You better," he'd mutter, settling into his recliner with a beer and the newspaper. The children sensed the tension but didn't understand it. They just knew Daddy was tired and Mommy tried harder. So I tried harder too. I kept the house cleaner. I cooked more elaborate meals. I made sure the children were quieter when Robert was home. None of it helped. Robert started criticizing everything. The way I folded laundry, the groceries I bought, the friends I talked to on the phone. Slowly, piece by piece, I stopped doing things that brought me joy. I stopped calling my sister in the evenings. I stopped reading novels because Robert said they were a waste of time. I stopped wearing lipstick because he said I was trying too hard. The children watched all of this. They saw their father dismiss their mother's efforts with rolled eyes and heavy sighs. They saw me apologize for things that weren't my fault. They learned that love meant sacrifice, and that women's sacrifices were expected, not appreciated. By the time Emily was in high school and David was in middle school, I had disappeared into the role of family servant. I woke up early to make breakfast. I packed lunches. I drove carpools. I did laundry. I cleaned bathrooms. I shopped for groceries. I cooked dinner. I attended school events alone because Robert was either working late or too tired to come. And somewhere in all that serving, I lost myself completely. Emily was smart and beautiful and knew it. She got good grades and was popular with the other kids at school. But she also learned to expect service without gratitude. When I'd spend hours helping her with a history project, building a model of a medieval castle out of cardboard and paint, she'd turn it in and forget to mention my help. When I'd drive her and 3 friends to the mall in Manhattan, she'd barely say goodbye before disappearing into the crowd. David was athletic and charming, the kind of boy who could talk his way out of trouble with a smile. But that charm came with manipulation. He learned that tears and promises could get him out of doing chores. He learned that "I forgot" was an acceptable excuse for anything he didn't want to do. They both learned that Mom was infinitely patient, that Mom would always be there, that Mom's dreams and needs came last, if they counted at all. Robert had a heart attack when Emily was 20 and David was 18. He survived, but the doctors said he needed to change his lifestyle. Less stress, less drinking, more attention to his health. I became his nurse as well as his housekeeper. I measured his medications and cooked heart-healthy meals he complained about. I drove him to doctor appointments and rehabilitation sessions. The children, now adults, continued to see me as the family problem solver. Emily had graduated from Queen's College with a degree in communications, but couldn't seem to find a job that suited her standards. She moved back home and treated my apartment like a hotel. She slept until noon, left dishes in the sink, and borrowed money for nights out with friends. "I'm looking for the right opportunity," she'd say when I gently suggested she take any job while searching for her dream position. I didn't go to college to work at some retail store. David joined the Army right after high school, which I thought would teach him discipline and responsibility. Instead, he learned new ways to avoid commitment. He'd come home on leave expecting me to do his laundry and cook his favorite meals. When his enlistment ended, he moved back to Queens but refused to live at home. "I need my own space," he said, renting a studio apartment in Astoria that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "But I'm still figuring out the civilian thing. Can you help with rent for a few months?" A few months became 2 years. 2 years became a permanent arrangement. Every month, David would call with some crisis that required financial help. His car broke down. His rent was raised. He was between jobs. He needed money for interviews, clothes, for training programs, for security deposits on better apartments he never actually moved into. Robert died 5 years ago. Massive stroke in his sleep. One night he was snoring beside me. The next morning he was gone. I found him when I woke up to make coffee. His face was peaceful, finally free from whatever anger had eaten at him for so many years. The funeral was small. Robert's drinking had cost him most of his friends, and his criticism had driven away our neighbors. Emily cried dramatically, clinging to my arm like a child. David stood stoic in his borrowed black suit, shaking hands and accepting condolences like he was the man of the family now. After the funeral, after the casseroles from church ladies had been eaten and the sympathy cards had been read, I sat alone in my apartment and wondered what came next. For 46 years, I'd been taking care of other people. First Emily and David, then Robert, then all of them together. I was 67 years old, and I had no idea who I was without someone to serve. Emily moved back home temporarily to keep me company during my grief. She took over the spare bedroom that had been Robert's office, filling it with clothes and makeup and vision boards covered with pictures of apartments in Manhattan she couldn't afford. "You shouldn't be alone right now," she said, But within a week, it was clear she wasn't there to comfort me. She was there because living with Mom was free, and she still hadn't found that perfect job she was waiting for. David started calling more often, but only when he needed something. Money for groceries because he'd spent his paycheck on entertainment. Money for car repairs. Money for dental work his insurance wouldn't cover. Always an emergency. Always urgent. Always my responsibility to solve. I dipped into Robert's life insurance money month after month. The small inheritance my mother had left me slowly disappeared into David's endless needs. My teacher's pension covered my basic living expenses, but between Emily's presence in my home and David's constant financial crises, I had nothing left for myself. Not that I complained. What kind of mother turns away her children when they need help? What kind of woman puts her own comfort before her family's well-being? But late at night, after Emily had left dishes in the sink and David had hung up without saying, "I love you," I'd sit at my kitchen table and feel so tired I could barely breathe. Not just physically tired, though the constant cleaning and cooking and running errands wore me down. Soul tired. Like some essential part of me had been worn away by years of giving without receiving. I'd look around my small apartment and see all the ways it had been shaped by other people's needs. Emily's things scattered across surfaces that used to be mine. Photos of the children dominated every wall, but there were no pictures of me alone, no evidence that I existed as an individual person. My books had been moved to make room for Emily's magazine collection. My comfortable chair had been claimed by Emily because it was closer to the window and had better light. Even in my own home, I felt like a guest. The worst part wasn't the financial drain or the lack of physical space. The worst part was the growing realization that my children saw me as a resource to be managed, not a person to be loved. They called when they needed something. They visited when it was convenient. They remembered my birthday only when Facebook reminded them. And even then, their gifts felt obligatory. Last Christmas was particularly bad. I spent 3 days cooking Emily's favorite prime rib dinner and David's favorite sides. I bought them thoughtful gifts I couldn't really afford, things I'd seen them mention wanting throughout the year. Emily gave me a gift card to Macy's that was obviously purchased at the last minute. David gave me a potted plant from the grocery store, still with the price sticker attached. But they expected me to be grateful. They expected me to act like their minimal effort was generous, like they were doing me a favor by showing up at all. After they left that Christmas night, I sat surrounded by wrapping paper and dirty dishes and wondered if this was what the rest of my life would look like. Serving people who took my service for granted, loving people who saw that love as weakness. I started having dreams about my old classroom. In the dreams, I was young again, writing lessons on the chalkboard while children raised their hands eagerly to answer questions. I'd wake up from those dreams feeling more rested than I'd felt in years, only to remember that woman was gone. She'd been buried under decades of other people's expectations. The Mother's Day card was just the final proof of something I'd been trying not to see for years. To Emily and David, I wasn't a person with feelings and dreams and needs of my own. I was staff. Reliable, uncomplaining, replaceable staff. Have you ever had someone you love treat you like you're invisible? Like your feelings don't matter because you're supposed to be strong enough to handle anything? The days after Mother's Day blurred together like watercolors in the rain. I kept replaying their laughter in my mind. The way they'd looked at each other when I picked up that card, like they'd pulled off the perfect prank. The way they'd walked out without even pretending to feel bad about what they'd done. I couldn't eat. Food tasted like cardboard, and my stomach stayed tied in knots. I couldn't sleep either. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their smirking faces. I heard Emily's giggle and David's casual cruelty. That's basically what you do, right? 3 days later, Emily came by to raid my refrigerator, something she did regularly without asking. She found me sitting at the kitchen table in the same house dress I'd been wearing since Sunday. "Mom, you look terrible," she said, opening my refrigerator and pulling out sandwich meat and cheese. "When's the last time you showered?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw a stranger. This beautiful young woman with my eyes and my mother's chin, making herself at home in my kitchen without permission, taking my food without gratitude, criticizing my appearance without offering comfort. "I've been thinking about Sunday," I said quietly. Emily paused in the middle of building her sandwich. "What about it?" "The card. What you and David wrote." She rolled her eyes and continued layering turkey on bread. "Oh my God, Mom, that was just a joke. You're being way too sensitive." Too sensitive. As if having feelings about being called a maid by my own children was unreasonable. "It didn't feel like a joke," I said. "Well, it was," Emily snapped, like I was being deliberately difficult. "You always take everything so seriously. Can't you just laugh at yourself sometimes?" Laugh at myself for being reduced to hired help after 50 years of sacrifice. "Why would I laugh about that?" I asked. Emily sighed heavily, the way she'd sighed as a teenager when I didn't understand her homework or couldn't drive her somewhere immediately. Because it's funny, Mom. You do act like a maid sometimes. Always cleaning up after everyone, always doing things nobody asked you to do. Nobody asked me to do. Like raising her was something I chose to do out of boredom rather than love. I'm your mother, I said, not your maid. Then stop acting like one, Emily said, taking a bite of her sandwich. Nobody's forcing you to do all that stuff. She was right, in a way that made everything worse. Nobody was forcing me. I'd chosen this role, day after day, year after year. I'd chosen to prioritize everyone else's comfort over my own dignity. I'd chosen to accept disrespect rather than risk conflict. But I'd chosen those things out of love, and they'd responded to that love with contempt. Emily finished her sandwich and left without cleaning up her mess. Crumbs on my counter, mayonnaise jar left open, plate in the sink. The automatic cleanup that usually followed her visits felt different this time. Instead of feeling needed, I felt used. That evening, David called with his monthly crisis. This time, it was his car registration. He'd forgotten to renew it, gotten a ticket, and now needed money for both the registration fee and the fine. It's just $300, he said, like that was pocket change instead of a week's worth of groceries. I'll pay you back next month when I get my bonus. There was never a bonus. There was never any payback, just the next crisis and the crisis after that. I can't help you this time, I heard myself say. Silence on the other end of the phone. Then, what do you mean you can't help? I mean, I don't have $300 to give you. Mom, this is important. I'll get arrested if I keep driving with an expired registration. Then maybe you should have renewed it on time. More silence. I could practically hear David's shock through the phone. I'd never refused him anything before. Ever. What's wrong with you? He asked. Are you having some kind of breakdown? A breakdown. Like setting boundaries was a sign of mental illness instead of mental health. I'm fine, I said. I just can't give you money right now. This is about that stupid card, isn't it? David's voice turned cold. Emily told me you're having some kind of meltdown about a joke. A joke. They'd reduced my entire life to a joke, and I was supposed to be grateful for their honesty. It wasn't funny, I said. Jesus Christ, Mom, we were being honest. You do everything for everyone. You never say no. You never ask for anything in return. You never even complain. What are we supposed to think? What were they supposed to think? Maybe that their mother loved them. Maybe that their mother deserved basic respect in return. I think we should take a break from talking, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Are you serious right now? You're going to cut me off because of a greeting card? I'm going to take some time to think about things. I hung up before he could argue. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from something that felt almost like relief. The phone rang again immediately. I didn't answer it. It rang 6 more times over the next hour. I unplugged it from the wall and sat in the silence of my apartment, listening to the sounds of Queens outside my window. Cars honking, people talking on the sidewalk, life continuing without me needing to manage or fix or serve anyone else. For the first time in decades, I had nothing I was supposed to be doing. That night, I did something I hadn't done since I was a young woman. I ran a hot bath just for myself. I used bubbles I'd received as a Christmas gift 3 years ago and had been saving for a special occasion. I lit a candle that smelled like vanilla. I soaked until the water started to cool, reading a novel I'd checked out from the Queen's Public Library, but hadn't touched because I'd been too busy with everyone else's needs. The woman in that book was my age, living alone in a small town, learning to paint watercolors for the first time. She was brave and independent and unashamed of taking up space in the world. I envied her fictional freedom. When I climbed out of the bath, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. My body looked older than I felt inside. 72 years of worry and work and putting everyone else first had left their marks. But my eyes looked different than they had in years. Less tired, more alert, like someone was waking up after a very long sleep. The next week passed quietly. Emily didn't come by to raid my refrigerator. David didn't call with any emergencies. Nobody needed me to solve their problems or clean up their messes. I should have felt lonely, but instead I felt curious. What did I want to eat for breakfast? What did I want to watch on television? What did I want to do with my afternoon? Such simple questions, but I realized I hadn't asked them in decades. I started small. I bought coffee that I liked instead of the cheap brand I'd been buying to save money for David's crises. I rearranged my living room so my comfortable chair was by the window where I could watch the street life below. I threw away Emily's old magazines and put my books back on the shelf where I could see them. Each small change felt revolutionary. I also started paying attention to my neighbor Rosa, something I'd been too busy to do before. Rosa was 64, originally from Puerto Rico, with silver hair and an infectious laugh that echoed through our building's thin walls. She'd lived across the hall from me for 8 years, but our conversations had always been brief and polite. One afternoon, as I was checking my mail in the lobby, Rosa approached me with concern in her dark eyes. "Vivian, honey, you okay? I haven't seen your daughter around, and usually she's here all the time." I should have given the standard response. "Everything's fine, just busy, nothing to worry about." Instead, I found myself telling Rosa the truth. "We had a disagreement," I said. Rosa nodded knowingly. "Family disagreements are the hardest ones. Come have coffee with me." I made pastelitos this morning. Rosa's apartment was a mirror image of mine, but felt completely different. Where mine had been sterile and organized around other people's comfort, hers was warm and lived in. Bright colors everywhere, plants covering every windowsill, photos of grandchildren and great-grandchildren mixed with pictures of Rosa herself. Rosa dancing at a wedding, Rosa on vacation in Florida, Rosa laughing with friends at a restaurant. "You want to talk about it?" Rosa asked, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs that somehow looked perfect together. I told her about the card, about years of feeling taken for granted, about the growing realization that my children saw me as a service provider rather than a person. Rosa listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her face showing the kind of understanding that comes from experience. "My daughter went through something similar with her kids," Rosa said when I finished. "She gave and gave until there was nothing left of her. Then one day she said enough and moved to Arizona, started painting pottery and dating again at 65. What happened with her children? They were mad at first, called her selfish, told everyone she was having a midlife crisis 20 years too late. But eventually they realized she wasn't their personal assistant. She was their mother, and mothers deserve respect, not just obedience." Rosa's words hit me like sunlight through heavy curtains. Mothers deserve respect, not just obedience. "I don't know how to change things," I admitted. "Start by changing yourself," Rosa said simply. "Stop doing things that make you feel bad about yourself. Start doing things that make you feel good. The rest will follow." That evening, I made a list. Things I would no longer do. Give money to David without a specific repayment plan. Let Emily treat my apartment like her personal hotel. Accept disrespect disguised as honesty. Apologize for having needs and feelings. Then I made another list. Things I wanted to try. Visit the Museum of Natural History in Manhattan. Take a cooking class. Learn to use the computer at the library. Call my sister in Florida, who I'd lost touch with years ago because Robert thought long-distance calls were wasteful. Small things. Normal things. Things that regular people did without feeling guilty about the time or money they spent on themselves. The next morning, I called Emily. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "We need to talk," I said when she answered. "About what?" Her tone was already defensive. "About our relationship. About how you treat me." Emily sighed heavily. "Mom, if this is still about that card, it's about more than the card. Can you come over tonight?" "I guess. But I don't understand why you're making such a big deal about everything lately. Making a big deal about being treated with basic human dignity. As if that was unreasonable." 6 o'clock, I said. "And Emily, don't bring David. This conversation is between you and me." I hung up before she could argue. The rest of the day, I cleaned my apartment. Not the frantic, perfectionist cleaning I usually did before family visits, but a calm, methodical tidying that felt more like meditation than work. I put away things that Emily had left scattered around my space. I moved my books back to where I wanted them. I removed the spare key from under my doormat, the one Emily used to let herself in whenever she felt like it. By 6 o'clock, my apartment looked like it belonged to me again. Emily arrived 15 minutes late, as usual. She tried the door handle first, expecting it to be unlocked like it always was. When she found it locked, she knocked impatiently. "Why is the door locked?" she asked when I let her in. "Because it's my apartment," I said simply. Emily looked around, noticing the changes immediately. "Where are my magazines?" I threw them away. They were taking up space I needed for my things. Her face darkened. "Those weren't all old magazines. Some of them were current. Then you should keep them at your own place." We stared at each other for a long moment. I could see Emily recalculating, trying to figure out this new version of her mother who locked doors and threw away magazines without asking permission first. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch. Emily perched on the edge of the cushions like she was ready to leave at any moment. "I've been doing some thinking since Mother's Day," I began. "Oh God, not this again." "Yes, this again. Emily, I raised you to be a strong, independent woman, but somewhere along the way, you learned to see me as weak and dependent on your approval. That needs to change." Emily's eyes flashed with anger. "I don't see you as weak. You see me as a maid? You said so yourself. That was a joke. No, it wasn't. It was you telling me the truth about how you really see me. And the truth is that you've been taking advantage of my love for years. Emily stood up abruptly. I can't believe you're attacking me like this. All I do is try to help you. You'd be completely alone if it wasn't for me. Help me. By eating my food, using my space, and treating me like hired help. I am alone, I said quietly. Even when you're here, I'm alone. Because you don't see me as a person worth knowing. You see me as a resource worth using. That's not true. When's the last time you asked how I was feeling? Not how I was doing, but how I was feeling? Emily opened and closed her mouth several times. She couldn't answer because she'd never asked. When's the last time you thanked me for anything? When's the last time you did something kind for me without being asked? More silence. You treat waitresses with more respect than you treat me, I said. At least you say please and thank you to them. Emily's face was red now, but I couldn't tell if it was from anger or shame. You're being ridiculous, she said finally. I'm your daughter. I shouldn't have to thank you for every little thing. You're supposed to take care of me. That's what mothers do. Supposed to take care of her. At 29 years old. Forever and without question or gratitude. I'm supposed to love you, I said. I'm not supposed to be your unpaid servant. Nobody asked you to be anyone's servant? But that's what I became. And you were happy to let me. Emily grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't, I agreed. But if you walk out of here without having a real conversation about how you treat me, then don't come back until you're ready to have that conversation. She stopped with her hand on the door handle. You're kicking me out? I'm setting a boundary. Emily turned back to look at me, and for a moment I saw confusion in her eyes instead of anger, like she was seeing a stranger instead of her predictable, accommodating mother. This isn't you, she said. Yes, it is, I replied. This is who I am when I'm not too tired from taking care of everyone else to take care of myself. Emily left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on my walls. I sat in the silence that followed, my heart racing but my mind clear. For the first time in years, I'd stood up for myself. I'd told the truth about how I felt, even though it made Emily angry. I'd set a boundary and meant it. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. The next few days were quiet. Emily didn't call or come by. David didn't call either, which meant Emily had told him about our conversation. I imagined them talking about me, maybe laughing about my breakdown, maybe plotting how to get me back under control. But I wasn't under anyone's control anymore. That was the point. Rosa knocked on my door Thursday evening, carrying a plate of rice and beans. Thought you might be hungry, she said. You've been too quiet over there. We ate together in my kitchen, talking about everything except my family drama. Rosa told me about her granddaughter's graduation from nursing school. I told her about a book I was reading. Normal conversation between two women who respected each other. After Rosa left, I realized how long it had been since I'd had a conversation that wasn't about someone else's problems or needs. How long it had been since someone had brought me food instead of the other way around. I was starting to remember what it felt like to be valued. Friday morning, I did something I'd been thinking about for days. I took the subway into Manhattan and walked through Central Park. It was a beautiful May morning, and the park was full of people jogging and walking dogs and pushing strollers. I found a bench near the pond and sat watching ducks paddle around while office workers ate lunch on nearby benches. A woman about my age was sitting alone on the next bench, sketching in a pad with colored pencils. Her drawing showed the pond and the ducks, but she'd added details that weren't really there. Brighter flowers, more dramatic clouds, a sense of magic that transformed the ordinary scene into something special. That's beautiful, I said. She looked up and smiled. Thank you, I just started taking art classes at the community center. I always wanted to learn to draw, but I told myself I was too old to start something new. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? 75. Seems ridiculous, doesn't it? Learning to draw at 75? It seems wonderful, I said, and I meant it. We talked for a few minutes about art and New York and the simple pleasure of sitting in the park on a beautiful day. When she packed up her pencils to leave, she handed me a small card. Community Center of Manhattan, she said. They have classes for everything. You should check it out. I held that card all the way home on the subway, thinking about the woman's confident pencil strokes and the joy on her face when she talked about learning something new. That evening, I looked up the community center's website on the computer at the Queens Public Library. They offered everything from cooking classes to book clubs to computer training for seniors. I printed out the schedule and circled 3 classes that interested me: beginning watercolor, creative writing for seniors, and introduction to digital photography. When was the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to? I couldn't remember. Saturday morning, Emily called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Mom, we need to talk, she said without preamble. I'm listening. This whole thing has gone too far. David's really upset about the money thing, and I'm upset about, well, everything. We think you should talk to someone. Someone? Like a therapist. Or maybe a doctor. You're not acting like yourself. Not acting like myself. Because standing up for myself was so foreign to who I'd been for so long. I have been thinking about talking to a therapist, I said. Emily sounded relieved. Good. I can help you find someone. Maybe someone who specializes in older adults or grief counseling, or I'll find my own therapist, I interrupted. But not for the reason you think. What do you mean? I mean, I want to talk to someone about setting healthy boundaries with my adult children, about learning to value myself, about building a life that isn't entirely focused on other people's needs. Silence on Emily's end. Emily, I love you. I love David. But the way you've been treating me is unacceptable, and I'm not going to tolerate it anymore. Mom, I'm not finished. I've spent 50 years putting everyone else's happiness before my own dignity. I've given you money I couldn't afford to give, cleaned up messes I didn't make, and accepted disrespect I didn't deserve. And you've both come to expect that treatment as though it's owed to you. That's not. It is true. And it's going to change. You can be part of that change, or you can continue to be angry about it. But either way, things are going to be different from now on. Emily was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. I don't understand what you want from us. I want you to treat me like a person you care about instead of a service you're entitled to use. We do care about you. Then show me, with your words and your actions. Stop taking and start giving. Stop assuming and start asking. Stop demanding and start appreciating. Another long silence. Can I come over and we can talk about this in person? Not yet, I said. I need some time to figure out what I want this relationship to look like going forward. When I'm ready, I'll let you know. I hung up before she could argue, but this time I felt sad instead of angry. I did love Emily. I loved her so much it had nearly destroyed me. But love without respect isn't really love at all. It's just need disguised as affection. I needed to learn the difference. Sunday morning, I woke up early and made myself a proper breakfast. Scrambled eggs with herbs from the small plant I'd bought at the bodega. Toast from the good bread I'd been saving for company that never came. Coffee strong enough to wake up my dreams. I sat at my kitchen table reading the newspaper, taking my time with each section instead of skimming for things that might interest other people. The crossword puzzle. The book reviews. An article about women starting new careers after retirement. At 10 o'clock, I walked to St. Margaret's, the Catholic church 3 blocks from my apartment. I hadn't been to Mass in months, but not because I'd lost faith. I'd lost time. Every Sunday had been consumed with cooking elaborate brunches for Emily and David, or cleaning up from their Saturday night visits, or running errands I'd been too busy to do during the week. The church was half empty, filled mostly with older women like myself and young families with small children. Father Martinez gave a homily about the parable of the talents, the story of servants who were given money to invest by their master. 2 servants doubled their money through wise investments. The third, afraid of losing what he'd been given, buried his talent in the ground and returned only the original amount. God doesn't want us to bury our gifts, Father Martinez said. He wants us to use them, to grow them, to share them with the world. But we can't share what we've buried out of fear. I thought about my buried talents, my teaching skills, my creativity, my capacity for friendship and joy and adventure. How much of myself had I buried over the years, telling myself I was being responsible when I was really just being afraid? After Mass, I walked home slowly, enjoying the warm May sunshine and the busy energy of Queens on a Sunday morning. Families heading to the park, couples walking hand in hand, people of all ages living their lives openly, without apology. I wanted that openness for myself. Monday morning, I called the community center and signed up for 3 classes. Watercolor painting on Tuesday evenings, creative writing on Thursday afternoons, digital photography on Saturday mornings. These are very popular classes, the woman on the phone said. You're lucky we had openings. Lucky. When was the last time I'd felt lucky instead of dutiful? Tuesday evening, I took the subway to Manhattan for my first art class. I was nervous. I hadn't been anywhere alone in years except for grocery shopping and errands. But I was also excited in a way I barely remembered how to feel. The classroom was bright and airy, with big windows and tables covered with paper and paints. 15 students, mostly women, mostly around my age or older. The instructor was a woman in her 50s with paint-stained fingers and an encouraging smile. Welcome, everyone. I'm Patricia, and I'm here to help you discover what you already know but might have forgotten, that you're all artists. You've just been too busy being other things to remember. For 2 hours, I lost myself in mixing colors and moving brushes across paper. My first painting was terrible, a lopsided tree that looked more like a green cloud on a stick. But the act of creating something, anything, felt like coming alive after a long sleep. Beautiful work, Patricia said, stopping by my easel. I love how bold you were with the green. A lot of beginners are afraid to use strong colors. Bold. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had described me as bold. On the subway home, I sat with my painting in my lap, not caring that other passengers might think I was silly for carrying around amateur artwork. A teenage girl sitting across from me smiled when she saw it. My grandmother just started painting too, she said. She says it's never too late to try something new. Never too late to try something new. I was 72 years old, and I was just beginning to discover who I might become. The photography class was even better. Learning to see the world through a camera lens made me notice details I'd been overlooking for years. The way afternoon light painted shadows on brick buildings, the expressions on strangers' faces as they hurried through their daily routines, the surprising beauty in ordinary street scenes. Our first assignment was to photograph something that represented home to us. Most of the other students took pictures of their houses or apartments or family members. I photographed the built-in bookshelf in my living room, the one I'd reclaimed from Emily's magazines, filled with books I loved, arranged the way I wanted them, inviting me to explore worlds beyond my small apartment. This is a very personal interpretation of home, the instructor said when I shared my photo with the class. Tell us what it means to you. Home isn't just where you live, I heard myself say. It's where you're free to be yourself. The other students nodded knowingly. Most of them were older too, and several came up after class to share their own stories of rediscovering themselves after years of being defined by other people's needs. I wasn't alone in this journey. That realization felt like finding treasure. David called 3 weeks after I'd started refusing to give him money. He was angry, which I'd expected, but underneath the anger I heard something else. Panic. Mom, I'm in serious trouble here. My landlord is threatening eviction. I need $1,500 by Friday or I'm going to be homeless. $1,500. More money than I spent on groceries in 3 months. What happened to your job? I asked. I got laid off. Budget cuts. It wasn't my fault. It was never his fault. The job before this one had ended because of personality conflicts with management. The job before that had ended because the company was restructuring. David always had explanations that made him the victim of circumstances beyond his control. When did you get laid off? 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, and he was just telling me now, because he'd assumed I would solve the problem without question, the way I always had. Have you applied for unemployment benefits? That takes forever to kick in. Mom, I need help now. Have you looked for another job? Of course I've looked, but it's not that easy. I can't just take anything. Just like Emily, David was too good for entry-level work while still expecting other people to support his standards. David, I'm not going to give you $1,500. What do you mean you're not going to give it to me? Mom, I'll be living on the street. No, you won't. You'll figure something out, the way adults do when they have problems. Adults with families get help from their families. Adults with families also contribute to their families instead of just taking from them. Silence. Then, I can't believe you're doing this to me. Doing this to him. Making him responsible for his own choices was somehow an attack. David, I love you, but I'm not going to enable you to avoid growing up anymore. Enabling? Jesus, Mom, you sound like some kind of self-help book. Maybe I did. Maybe that was progress. I've given you thousands of dollars over the past 5 years. Money I couldn't afford to give, money I took from my own security to cover your emergencies. But they're not really emergencies, are they? They're consequences of your choices. So you're just going to let me be homeless? I'm going to let you be an adult. David hung up without saying goodbye. I sat holding the phone, my heart racing but my resolve firm. For the first time in his adult life, David was going to have to solve his own problems. It felt terrifying and necessary at the same time. 2 days later, Rosa knocked on my door with news. Your son was here this morning, she said, talking to Mrs. Chen in 3B, asking if she knew anyone who could loan him money. My stomach dropped. David was going around the building, asking my neighbors for money, humiliating both of us in the process. What did Mrs. Chen tell him? She told him to get a job, Rosa said with a small smile. Mrs. Chen doesn't play games. I felt embarrassed that David was bothering my neighbors, but also strangely proud that Mrs. Chen had refused him. At least someone in David's life was willing to say no. Rosa, if he comes back, please don't feel obligated to help him. This is something he needs to figure out on his own. Rosa patted my arm gently. Honey, the only person in this building with money problems is your son. The rest of us know how to budget. That weekend, Emily called. Her voice was different. less demanding, more uncertain. Mom, can we please talk? In person? Are you ready to have a real conversation about how you treat me? I think so. I've been thinking about what you said, and maybe some of it was true. Maybe some of it was true. Not exactly a full acknowledgement, but it was a start. You can come by Sunday afternoon, I said. 2:00. Sunday morning, I prepared for Emily's visit, the way I prepared for anything important now, by centering myself first. I went to Mass, came home, and made a good lunch just for me, and spent an hour reading in my favorite chair by the window. When Emily arrived, she looked different, less put together than usual. Her hair needed washing, and she wasn't wearing makeup. She looked younger and more vulnerable, like the little girl she'd once been. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, and it was the first time she'd thanked me for anything in months. We sat in my living room, but this time Emily didn't sprawl across my furniture like she owned it. She sat upright, her hands folded in her lap. "I've been staying with a friend in Brooklyn," she said, "thinking about things." "What kinds of things?" "About how I treat people, how I treat you." She paused, looking around my apartment. "This place looks different." It did look different. I'd been gradually removing things that didn't belong to me and replacing them with things that did. Plants, books, a small painting I'd bought at a street fair, objects that reflected my taste instead of family obligations. "I've been making some changes," I said. "I can see that." Emily was quiet for a moment. "Mom, I want to apologize." The words I'd been waiting years to hear. But now that she was saying them, I felt cautious instead of relieved. "For what, specifically?" Emily took a deep breath. "For taking advantage of you. For treating your apartment like my personal hotel. For not appreciating everything you do." She paused. "And for that card. That was cruel." It was a good apology, more specific than I'd expected. But I'd learned to listen for what wasn't said as much as what was. "What changed your mind?" I asked. Emily looked uncomfortable. "Living with my friend made me realize some things. She doesn't do everything for me the way you always did. When I used up all her milk, she asked me to replace it. When I left dishes in her sink, she told me to clean them. Basic roommate stuff that I never thought about when I was living here. Basic roommate stuff. The respect that strangers showed each other automatically, but Emily had never shown me. And I realized," Emily continued, "that I expected more from you than I would expect from anyone else, because you always gave it." It was a moment of genuine insight, the first I'd ever heard from Emily. "Why do you think I always gave it?" I asked. "Because you love me. And?" Emily thought about it. "And because I let you. Because it was easier for me to let you take care of everything than to take care of myself." More insight. This conversation was going better than I'd hoped. "Emily, I do love you, but love isn't supposed to be one-sided. It's not supposed to make one person smaller so the other person can be bigger. I know that now." Emily's eyes were shiny with tears. "Mom, I want to do better. I want us to have a real relationship, not just whatever this has been. What does doing better look like to you?" "I don't know exactly. Maybe I could take you out to lunch sometimes, instead of always eating your food. Maybe I could help you with things instead of always asking you to help me. Maybe I could ask how you're doing and actually listen to the answer." These were good ideas. Simple but meaningful changes that would shift the dynamic between us. "I'd like that," I said. "But Emily, I need you to understand that things can't go back to the way they were before. I can't go back to being someone who exists just to make your life easier." "I don't want them to go back," Emily said quickly. "The way things were before wasn't fair to you. I can see that now." We talked for another hour, not about Emily's problems or needs, but about my art classes and my photography and the books I'd been reading. Emily asked questions and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. She told me about her friend's job search tips and her own plans to finally take the civil service exam she'd been putting off for years. It felt like a conversation between two adults who respected each other. When Emily got ready to leave, she hesitated at the door. "Mom, would you like to go to lunch next Sunday? There's a place in Astoria I've been wanting to try." "I'd like that," I said. After she left, I sat in my quiet apartment feeling something I hadn't felt in years, hopeful about my relationship with my daughter. It was a small beginning, but it was a beginning. David was a different story. He didn't call for 3 weeks after our last conversation, and when he finally did, it wasn't to apologize. "I found a place to live," he said without preamble. "I'm sharing an apartment with 2 other guys in Ridgewood." "That's good, David. I'm glad you found a solution." "No thanks to you." He was still angry, still blaming me for not solving his problems. I felt sad about that, but not guilty. "David, I hope someday you'll understand that helping you become independent was more loving than keeping you dependent." "Whatever." Look, I'm calling because I need my birth certificate and social security card for this new job I might get. They're in your safe. Important documents that he'd never bothered to keep track of himself, because he'd always assumed I would manage that kind of thing for him. You can come by Wednesday evening to get them, I said. Wednesday doesn't work for me. Can't you just mail them? No, these are important documents. You need to pick them up in person. David sighed heavily. Fine. Wednesday at 7. Wednesday at 7 came and went. David didn't show up or call to cancel. Thursday morning, he called during breakfast. Sorry about yesterday. Something came up. Can I come by tonight instead? Something came up. My time wasn't valuable enough to deserve advance notice when his plans changed. No, I said. You'll need to call ahead and schedule a specific time and then show up when you say you will. Are you serious? They're my documents. They're your documents in my safe in my apartment. If you want them, you need to respect my time. Another heavy sigh. Okay, fine. Can I come by Saturday at 2? Yes. And Mom? I'll probably need some other stuff too, like my old report cards and vaccination records. Still assuming I was his personal filing system. David, I'm going to give you all the documents that belong to you. After Saturday, managing your own paperwork is your responsibility. Saturday at 2 o'clock, David showed up 20 minutes late. I handed him a manila envelope with all his important documents and papers. Here's everything, I said. He looked inside the envelope, then back at me. This is it? That's everything that belongs to you. What about copies? What if I lose something? Then you'll have to get replacement copies from the appropriate agencies, the way other adults do. David stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. The concept of managing his own life was genuinely foreign to him. Mom, I don't understand why you're being so mean to me. I'm your son. Mean. Setting boundaries was mean instead of healthy. David, I love you, but I'm not going to take care of you like you're still a child. You're 30 years old. So what, you're just cutting me off completely? I'm treating you like the adult you are instead of the child you were. David left without saying goodbye, clutching his envelope of documents like a life preserver. I watched from my window as he walked down the street, his shoulders hunched with anger and confusion. I felt sad for him, but I also felt free. Over the next few months, my life began to take on a rhythm that was entirely my own. Tuesday evenings for art class, Thursday afternoons for creative writing, Saturday mornings for photography. The rest of my time filled with reading, walking, cooking simple meals I actually enjoyed, and gradually building friendships with people who valued my company instead of my services. In writing class, I started working on a memoir about my years as a teacher. Those memories felt like discovering buried treasure. I'd loved teaching so much, and I'd been good at it. Writing about those experiences reminded me that I'd had a professional identity once, a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with family obligations. Your stories about the classroom are wonderful, said Margaret, a woman in my writing group who'd been a nurse for 40 years before retiring. You can see how much you cared about those children, cared about children who weren't even my own. It struck me that I'd shown more respect for my students' autonomy than I'd ever demanded from my own children. Emily and I had lunch twice, and both times felt like genuine visits between people who enjoyed each other's company. She was still job hunting, but she'd started the civil service application process and seemed more focused than she'd been in years. I think living on my own is good for me, she told me over soup and sandwiches at a diner in Astoria. I'm learning to do things I always expected other people to do for me. Like what? Like reading instructions instead of just assuming someone will explain things to me. Like budgeting my money instead of spending whatever I want and figuring out later how to pay for it. Basic adult skills that she'd never needed to develop because I'd always been there to smooth over the consequences of her choices. It's harder than I thought it would be, Emily admitted, but it feels good too. Like I'm becoming a real person instead of just someone's daughter. I understood that feeling completely. David, on the other hand, seemed to be struggling with his new independence. Rosa told me she'd seen him in the neighborhood a few times, looking thin and generally unhappy. He asked Mrs. Rodriguez if she knew anyone who was hiring, Rosa reported. She told him about the opening at her son's construction company, but he said construction work was beneath him. Beneath him. David was facing homelessness and eviction, but manual labor was still too good for him. I felt sorry for David, but I also felt something I'd never allowed myself to feel before. Detached from his problems. His struggles were sad, but they weren't my emergency to solve. 6 months after the Mother's Day card incident, I ran into David at the grocery store. He was in the frozen food aisle, looking at prices on cheap frozen dinners. When he saw me, his face went through several expressions. Surprise, embarrassment, defiance, and finally something that might have been regret. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Hello, David. How are you?" "I'm okay." But he didn't look okay. He looked like he'd lost weight, and his clothes weren't as clean as they used to be. "How are you?" "I'm well, thank you." We stood there awkwardly for a moment, surrounded by freezer cases and the normal sounds of grocery shopping. David looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "Mom, I got that job. The construction one Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned. That's good. I'm glad you found work. It's not what I wanted to be doing. Most of us don't get to do exactly what we want," I said gently. "But work gives you dignity and independence." David nodded, but he still looked lost. I miss talking to you." My heart softened a little. "I miss talking to you too. Could we have coffee sometime? Just to talk?" I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda, but all I saw was a young man who was finally beginning to understand what he'd lost. "I'd like that," I said. "But David, if we're going to rebuild our relationship, it has to be based on mutual respect. I can't go back to being your personal crisis manager." "I know," he said quickly. "I understand that now." "Do you?" He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I think so. I'm still learning how to take care of myself. It's harder than I thought it would be." Honesty. From David, that was new. "Learning to take care of yourself is one of the most important things you can do," I said. "Not just for you, but for anyone who wants to have a relationship with you." We exchanged phone numbers, and David promised to call in a few days to set up a coffee date. As I watched him walk away with his cart full of frozen dinners, I felt something I'd never felt for my son before: respect for his efforts to grow up. It was a small beginning, but it was a beginning. A week later, Emily called with news that surprised me. "Mom, I got the job, the civil service position with the city. I start Monday." "Emily, that's wonderful. Congratulations." "Thank you." She paused. "I wanted to ask you something. Would you like to celebrate with me? Maybe dinner somewhere nice?" My treat. Her treat. Emily had never offered to pay for anything in her life. "I'd love that," I said. We went to a restaurant in Forest Hills, a place with tablecloths and real flowers and waiters who called us ladies. Emily wore a dress I'd never seen before and seemed genuinely excited about her new job. "It's not glamorous work," she said as we shared an appetizer, "processing applications for city licenses and permits. But it's steady, and the benefits are good, and there's room for advancement." "It sounds perfect," I said, and I meant it. Steady work with benefits was exactly what Emily needed. "I've been thinking about what you said, about love not being one-sided, about relationships needing to be between equals." Emily put down her fork and looked at me seriously. "I want you to know that I'm committed to doing better, not just saying I'll do better, but actually doing it." "What does that look like?" "Well, for starters, I want to take you somewhere special for your birthday next month, somewhere you've always wanted to go but never got to." My birthday was in July. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had made special plans for it. "Where would you like to go?" Emily asked. I thought about it. I've always wanted to visit the Cloisters, the medieval art museum in Manhattan. I used to take my students there on field trips, but I never got to really look at the art myself because I was too busy keeping track of children. "The Cloisters it is," Emily said with a smile. "We'll make a whole day of it." For my 73rd birthday, Emily picked me up early on a Saturday morning, and we took the subway to the far northern tip of Manhattan. The Cloisters sits on a hill overlooking the Hudson River, surrounded by gardens that feel transported from medieval Europe. We spent 4 hours there. Emily was patient and interested as I read exhibit descriptions aloud and shared what I remembered about the different periods of medieval art. She asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely curious about the history behind the pieces we were viewing. In the garden, we sat on a bench overlooking the river and ate lunch we'd packed. "This is beautiful," Emily said, looking out at the water and the green hills of New Jersey beyond. "I can see why you wanted to come here." "I feel like I'm seeing it for the first time," I said, "being here as myself, not as Mrs. Henderson's class chaperone." "Tell me about teaching," Emily said. "What did you love about it?" So I told her. About the breakthrough moments when struggling readers finally decoded a difficult word. About the shy children who bloomed when you gave them individual attention. About the satisfaction of creating lessons that made learning feel like play. "You sound like you were a wonderful teacher," Emily said. "I was," I said, and it felt good to acknowledge that without false modesty. I really was. "Do you miss it?" "I miss who I was when I was teaching, confident, purposeful, valued for my mind and my skills." Emily was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm sorry I never asked you about that before, about who you were before you were our mom." It was the most thoughtful thing she'd ever said to me. On the subway home, Emily asked if I'd be interested in going to a Broadway show for Christmas. "I've never been to a Broadway show," I admitted. "Then we're definitely going. I'll get us tickets for something good." As we sat on the train, surrounded by the diverse crowd of people that makes New York City so vibrant, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Excited about the future. Not just surviving each day, but looking forward to experiences I'd never had and dreams I'd never pursued. David and I met for coffee 2 weeks after our encounter at the grocery store. He looked better, cleaner, more rested, though still thinner than he used to be. "The job is hard," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Physical labor 8 hours a day. My body hurts constantly. But you're still doing it." "Yeah, I'm still doing it." He looked surprised by his own persistence. "The other guys on the crew are okay. Some of them have been doing this kind of work for 20 years. They don't complain about it. Because honest work isn't something to complain about." David nodded slowly. "I'm starting to understand that. I had this idea that certain kinds of work were beneath me, but I don't know where I got that idea." I could have told him where he got it. From me, from years of me making excuses for his choices and solving his problems so he never had to face consequences. But he was figuring it out on his own now, which was better. "David, I'm proud of you for sticking with something difficult." He looked up from his coffee, surprised. "Really? Really? It takes courage to do work that's hard on your body. It takes character to show up every day even when you don't want to." I never thought about it that way. We talked for an hour. Not about money or emergencies or what David needed from me, but about his work and his roommates and the neighborhood he was living in now. About my art classes and the books I'd been reading. Conversation between two adults who were interested in each other's lives. When we got ready to leave, David hesitated. "Mom, I want to say something, and I'm not sure how to say it right." I waited. "I think I understand now why you stopped helping me. Not helping me, enabling me. I couldn't take care of myself because I'd never had to. And I couldn't respect you because you never demanded respect." It was a remarkable insight from someone who'd been so resistant to self-examination. "I'm still angry sometimes," David continued, "when my back hurts after work, or when I have to eat ramen noodles because I can't afford groceries until payday. Part of me still thinks you should fix those problems for me. But I also know that if you kept fixing everything for me, I'd never learn to fix anything for myself. And I want to be someone who can take care of himself. And maybe someday take care of other people too." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "David, that might be the most mature thing you've ever said to me." He squeezed back. "I had a good teacher. It just took me 30 years to pay attention." We started meeting for coffee every other Saturday. David would tell me about his work week, his slow progress toward financial stability, his tentative plans for the future. I would tell him about my classes, my photography projects, my gradual rediscovery of interests I'd set aside decades ago. It wasn't the relationship we'd had before, built on his need and my endless giving. It was better. It was based on mutual interest and growing respect. 1 year after the Mother's Day card that changed everything, I woke up on a bright May morning and realized I was happy. Not momentarily pleased or temporarily content, but genuinely happy with my life. I was still living in the same cramped apartment in Queens, but it felt like a different place entirely. It was decorated with things I loved. Paintings from my art class, photographs I'd taken around the city, books I'd chosen for my own pleasure, fresh flowers on the table, flowers I'd bought for myself because I deserved to have beautiful things in my space. Emily had kept her promise about building a more equal relationship. She called regularly just to talk, not because she needed something. She remembered important dates and made thoughtful plans. When I'd been sick with a head cold in February, she'd brought soup and stayed to watch old movies with me, taking care of me the way I'd taken care of her when she was little. David was still a work in progress, but he was making progress. He'd been promoted to crew leader at the construction company and was taking night classes in project management. He'd started dating a nurse named Sarah who seemed to appreciate his growing maturity. When he talked about Sarah, his voice carried a tenderness I'd never heard before. "She doesn't put up with any nonsense," David told me over coffee one Saturday. "If I leave dishes in her sink, she hands me a sponge. If I'm late, she starts without me. I like that about her." He was learning to value respect instead of taking advantage of unconditional acceptance. Rosa and I had become close friends, spending evenings together cooking meals from her childhood in Puerto Rico and mine in the Irish-American household where I'd grown up. We went to movies and museums and street festivals, two women in our 70s discovering that friendship could be as nourishing as any family relationship. My art had improved dramatically. I'd progressed from terrible trees to recognizable landscapes, and my instructor thought I was ready to try figure drawing. My photographs had evolved from snapshots to thoughtful compositions that captured the energy and diversity of New York City. Most importantly, I'd learned to value my own company. I could spend an entire Saturday alone without feeling lonely. Reading, painting, walking through different neighborhoods with my camera, cooking a meal just for myself. I discovered that solitude wasn't the same as isolation, and that choosing to be alone was different from being abandoned. On that May morning, exactly 1 year after my children had given me a card signed, "Thanks, Maid," I made myself a celebration breakfast. Real eggs Benedict with hollandaise sauce I'd learned to make in a cooking class. Fresh fruit, coffee from the good beans. I set the table with my mother's china, which I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed to come. Every day I was alive and free to make my own choices was a special occasion. After breakfast, I called Emily. "Happy anniversary," I said when she answered. "Anniversary of what?" "The day you and David gave me that card. The day I decided to stop accepting disrespect disguised as love." Emily was quiet for a moment. "That seems like a strange thing to celebrate." "It was the day I started getting my life back. That's definitely worth celebrating." "Mom, I'm still embarrassed about that card. It was cruel." "It was honest," I said. "And sometimes we need honesty, even when it hurts, to see clearly enough to make changes." Do you think our relationship is better now than it was before?" I considered the question. "Emily, before that day, you saw me as someone who existed to serve you. Now you see me as a person worth knowing. Of course, our relationship is better. I love you, Mom. I love you too. But more importantly, I like you now. I enjoy your company. That's something I couldn't say a year ago." We made plans to meet for dinner that week, and when we hung up, I felt grateful for her growth and my own. I called David too. "Hey, it's Mom. I wanted to tell you that I'm proud of the man you're becoming." "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot coming from you." "David, do you remember what you wrote in that Mother's Day card last year?" "Yeah, I'm still sorry about that." "Don't be sorry about it. Be grateful for it." That card was the push I needed to demand better treatment from the people I love, including you. "I am grateful," David said. "Not for being cruel to you, but for you caring enough about me to make me grow up." "Growing up is hard work," I said, "but you're doing it." That evening, I took myself out to dinner. Not to a diner or a fast food place, but to a real restaurant with white tablecloths and a wine list. I ordered a glass of good red wine and the salmon special, and I people-watched while I ate slowly and thoughtfully. A family at a nearby table caught my attention. Grandparents, parents, and 3 children ranging from about 6 to 16. The grandmother was clearly the family matriarch, directing conversation and making sure everyone had what they needed. But the family deferred to her with affection, not resentment. They asked her opinion on things. They included her in their jokes. They treated her like someone whose presence made the meal better, not like someone whose role was to make everyone else's experience smoother. That's what I wanted for myself. Not to be needed, but to be valued. Not to be taken for granted, but to be appreciated. Not to be invisible, but to be seen as a full person worthy of respect and consideration. I was getting there. After dinner, I walked through the quiet streets of my neighborhood, past bodega shops and apartment buildings where families were settling in for the evening. Children's laughter drifted from windows. Couples walked hand in hand. Elderly men played dominoes on stoops while their wives chatted nearby. Life happening all around me, and for the first time in years I felt like I was part of it instead of just watching it pass by. At home, I sat by my window with a cup of tea and looked out at the lights of Queens stretching toward Manhattan in the distance. Behind me, my apartment was quiet but not empty, filled with things I loved, evidence of a life I was actively creating rather than just enduring. I thought about all the Mother's Days I'd spent waiting for my children to show me they loved me, cooking elaborate brunches they barely thanked me for, cleaning up messes they didn't offer to help with, accepting minimal effort and pretending it was enough because I was afraid of asking for more. This Mother's Day, I hadn't waited for anyone else to make me feel valued. I'd valued myself. I'd celebrated my own growth, my own courage, my own hard-won happiness. For 73 years, I'd been someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother. Only in the past year had I learned to be simply myself, and myself was pretty wonderful. 2 months later, something happened that tested all the growth I thought I'd achieved. Emily called on a Thursday evening, crying hysterically. "Mom, I need help. Something terrible happened at work, and I think I'm going to get fired, and I don't know what to do." My first instinct was pure maternal panic. Emily was in crisis, and I needed to fix it immediately. Every protective impulse I'd developed over 30 years of motherhood came rushing back. "Calm down and tell me what happened," I said, already mentally cataloging ways I could help her solve whatever problem she was facing. "I made a mistake on some paperwork, and it caused a big delay in processing business licenses, and my supervisor is furious, and there might be an investigation, and I could lose my job, and I can't afford to lose my job, and—" "Emily, breathe," I interrupted. "Just breathe." I could hear her taking shaky breaths on the other end of the phone. "Okay, she said finally. Okay, I'm calmer. Now tell me exactly what happened. Emily explained that she'd misunderstood instructions on a new form and had been processing applications incorrectly for several weeks. The error had created a backlog that would take weeks to sort out, and some businesses were angry about delays in getting their licenses approved. It was an honest mistake, Emily said, but it was a big one. My old self would have immediately started making plans to fix everything. I would have offered to call Emily's supervisor and explain that she was still learning. I would have researched Emily's rights as a city employee. I would have prepared to support her financially if she lost her job. Instead, I listened. What did your supervisor say exactly? I asked. That I need to meet with her and the department head tomorrow morning. That they need to review my work from the past month to see how extensive the problem is. And then they'll decide what to do. But Mom, what if they fire me? I just got this job. I can't go back to being unemployed. Emily, what do you think you should do? I don't know. That's why I'm calling you. I need you to help me figure this out. 3 months ago, I would have immediately started problem solving. Tonight, I heard something different in Emily's request. Not a daughter asking her mother for guidance, but an adult trying to avoid taking responsibility for her own situation. Emily, you're 29 years old with a college degree and a year of work experience. I think you're fully capable of figuring out how to handle this situation. But what if I handle it wrong? Then you'll learn from handling it wrong, and you'll do better next time. Emily was quiet for a moment. Mom, I'm scared. Of course you're scared. Making mistakes at work is scary, but being scared doesn't mean you can't handle it. What would you do if you were me? It was a fair question, asked without the demanding tone she used to use. If I were you, I'd prepare for tomorrow's meeting by writing down exactly what happened and when. I'd take responsibility for the mistake without making excuses. I'd present a plan for how to prevent similar errors in the future. And I'd be honest about wanting to keep the job and willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild trust. That's good advice, Emily said, and I could hear her writing things down. What if they fire me anyway? Then you'll file for unemployment benefits and start looking for another job, the same way millions of people handle job loss. Would you help me with my resume if that happens? Of course. But Emily, I'm not going to take care of you financially if you lose this job. You'll need to figure out another solution. I know that, Emily said. I wouldn't ask you to. 6 months ago, she absolutely would have asked me to support her. Her acceptance of that boundary showed how much she'd grown too. Emily, you're going to be fine. This mistake doesn't define you or your career. How you handle it will say much more about your character than the mistake itself. Thanks, Mom. I feel better. Call me tomorrow after your meeting and let me know how it goes. I will. And Mom, thank you for not trying to fix this for me. I need to learn how to handle my own problems. After Emily hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment feeling proud of both of us. She'd called because she was scared and needed emotional support, not because she expected me to solve her problem. I'd offered guidance without taking over. It was exactly the kind of relationship I'd hoped we could build. Emily called the next evening with an update. I still have my job, she said, relief clear in her voice. What happened? Everything you said to do worked. I took responsibility, I presented a prevention plan, and I was honest about wanting to do better. My supervisor said she appreciated my maturity in handling the situation. I'm glad it worked out. But I'm on probation for 6 months, and I have to do additional training on proper procedures. That seems fair. It does, Emily agreed. Mom, I want to thank you again for not rushing in to rescue me. If you'd called my boss or tried to fix it for me, it would have made me look incompetent instead of just inexperienced. You're not incompetent, Emily. You made a mistake, you took responsibility, and you're going to learn from it. That's what competent adults do. I'm still learning how to be a competent adult, Emily said, but I think I'm getting better at it. She was getting better at it. And so was I, at being her mother without being her manager. 6 months later, in December, Emily kept her promise about Broadway tickets. She took me to see a revival of Hello, Dolly, starring a legendary actress I'd admired for decades. I'd lived in New York my entire life, but had never been inside a real Broadway theater. The ornate ceiling, the red velvet seats, the electricity in the air as the audience settled in for the performance. It was magical in a way I hadn't expected. This is incredible, I whispered to Emily as the lights dimmed. Wait until you see the show, she whispered back. For 2.5 hours, I was transported into a world of music and dancing and storytelling that felt like pure joy. The lead actress was magnificent, commanding the stage with energy and humor that made her seem decades younger than her actual age. During intermission, Emily and I sat in the lobby drinking champagne and people watching. Look at all these people, Emily said. From all over the world, all here to experience the same thing we're experiencing. It struck me that this was exactly what I'd been missing for so many years. Shared experiences that had nothing to do with family obligations or household management. Pure enjoyment for its own sake. Emily, this is one of the best nights I've had in years, I told her. Really? Really? Thank you for thinking to do this. Thank you for raising me to appreciate beautiful things, even if it took me a while to remember that lesson. After the show, we walked through Times Square despite the December cold, both of us energized by the performance and the bright lights and the crowds of people celebrating Friday night in the city. I have something to tell you, Emily said as we waited for the subway back to Queens. What's that? I've been seeing someone, a guy I met through work. My first reaction was surprise that Emily hadn't mentioned dating anyone before. My second reaction was happiness that she felt comfortable sharing personal news with me. Tell me about him. His name is Marcus. He's a supervisor in a different department, so there's no conflict of interest. He's smart and funny and… Emily paused, looking a little embarrassed. He treats me like I'm worth taking care of, but he also expects me to take care of myself. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense. Emily had learned to value relationships based on mutual respect instead of one-sided need. He sounds wonderful. When do I get to meet him? Maybe soon. We're planning to spend New Year's Eve together, and I was thinking, would you like to have dinner with us sometime in January? Nothing formal, just a chance to meet. Meeting Emily's boyfriend as her equal partner in planning, not as the family authority who had to approve her choices. Another sign of how healthy our relationship had become. I'd love that, I said. On New Year's Eve, I had plans of my own. Rosa and I went to a party at the community center, where I knew people from my art class and photography class and writing group. We danced to music from our youth and talked about our plans for the coming year, and toasted at midnight with plastic cups of champagne. At 73, I was surrounded by friends who valued my company and enjoyed my conversation. I was pursuing interests that fed my soul. I was financially stable because I'd stopped supporting other people's irresponsible choices. I had healthy relationships with both my children based on mutual respect rather than unilateral sacrifice. I had built a life that was entirely my own. As Rosa and I rode the subway home, both of us a little tipsy and very happy, I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years earlier. Invisible, exhausted, taken for granted by the people she loved most. Rosa, I said, do you think people can really change? Honey, I think people can do anything they set their minds to, including becoming who they were always meant to be, who I was always meant to be. Not just someone's mother or wife or caretaker, but a full person with interests and opinions and dreams of my own. A person worthy of respect and consideration and love that didn't require sacrificing my dignity to earn it. It had taken me 71 years to figure that out, but better late than never. This spring, 3 years after the Mother's Day card that changed everything, I'm planning my first solo vacation. A week in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I'm going to take a painting workshop and visit art galleries and hike in landscapes completely different from anything I've seen in New York. Emily thinks it's a wonderful idea. David offered to drive me to the airport. Both of them are excited for me to have an adventure that has nothing to do with anyone's needs but my own. Send us pictures, Emily said when I told her about the trip. I want to see everything. Make sure you do things just for fun, David added. Don't worry about proving anything to anyone. My children, both of them now functional adults with their own lives and relationships, are encouraging me to prioritize my own happiness. It's a development I never could have imagined 3 years ago. The truth is, I probably wouldn't have had the courage to plan this trip if that cruel Mother's Day card hadn't forced me to examine my life honestly. If Emily and David hadn't been so blatantly disrespectful, I might have continued accepting minimal effort and calling it love for years longer. Sometimes the worst thing people do to us becomes the catalyst for the best thing we do for ourselves. I still live in the same apartment in Queens, but everything else about my life has transformed. I wake up each morning excited about the day ahead instead of dreading the demands that will be placed on me. I go to sleep each night, satisfied with choices I made for myself instead of exhausted from serving others. I have money in my savings account for the first time in decades because I stopped funding other people's emergencies. I have friendships with people who call me because they enjoy my company, not because they need something from me. I have hobbies that feed my creativity and interests that continue expanding my understanding of the world. Most importantly, I have a relationship with myself based on respect instead of criticism. I treat myself with the kindness I spent decades showing to others. I prioritize my own needs without guilt. I say no to requests that don't serve my well-being. And I don't apologize for having boundaries. For 71 years, I believed that love meant sacrifice. That being a good mother meant accepting any treatment my children dished out. That keeping the peace was more important than maintaining my dignity. I was wrong about all of it. Real love requires mutual respect. Good mothers teach their children to value other people's feelings, not just their own. Peace without dignity isn't peace at all. It's surrender. The woman who opened that Mother's Day card 3 years ago and read, "Thanks, maid," was broken by years of giving without receiving. She'd lost herself so completely in serving others that she'd forgotten she was a person worthy of love and respect in her own right. That woman is gone. In her place is someone stronger, clearer, more honest about what she will and won't accept from the people in her life. Someone who values herself enough to demand that others value her too. I wouldn't trade this hard-won wisdom for anything. Not even for the fantasy relationship I once imagined I could earn through endless sacrifice and unconditional acceptance. The relationships I have now, with Emily, with David, with Rosa, with my friends from various classes, are built on solid foundations of mutual respect and genuine affection. Nobody in my life sees me as a resource to be managed or a problem solver to be exploited. They see me as Vivian, a complex, interesting person with thoughts and feelings and dreams of my own. It's the difference between being needed and being valued, between being used and being loved. I spent decades settling for being needed. Now I know I deserve to be valued. As I finish writing this story on a quiet Sunday morning in Queens, with sunlight streaming through my windows and jazz music playing softly in the background, I feel the deep satisfaction that comes from hard work finally paying off. Not physical work or emotional labor performed for someone else's benefit, but the internal work of learning to respect and value myself. My phone will probably ring later today. It might be Emily calling to chat about her week or share news about Marcus, who's become a permanent fixture in her life and a welcome addition to our family dinners. It might be David calling to tell me about his latest promotion or ask for advice about his relationship with Sarah. It might be Rosa suggesting we try a new restaurant or go see a movie. Whoever calls, they'll be calling because they want to talk to me, not because they need something from me. That's a distinction that makes all the difference in the world. Have you ever found yourself in a relationship where you gave and gave until there was nothing left of yourself? Have you ever loved someone who saw your love as weakness instead of strength? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity? If any of this story sounds familiar, I want you to know that it's never too late to demand better treatment from the people in your life. It's never too late to rediscover who you are when you're not busy taking care of everyone else. It's never too late to build relationships based on mutual respect instead of one-sided sacrifice. It won't be easy. The people who benefit from your endless giving won't be happy when you start setting boundaries. They might accuse you of being selfish or cruel or different from who you used to be. They might not understand that you're not rejecting them. You're finally respecting yourself. But if you can hold on to your resolve long enough for the dust to settle, you might find what I found, that the people who truly love you will rise to meet your new standards. And the people who don't, well, maybe they never loved you as much as they loved what you could do for them. Either way, you'll be free to build a life that honors your worth instead of ignoring it. The Mother's Day card that broke my heart 3 years ago was signed, "Thanks, maid." If I could write back to my children today, I'd sign my response, "You're welcome, Mom," because that's who I am now. Not anyone's maid or manager or personal crisis counselor, just Mom, a real person who happens to love them enough to want them to become the best versions of themselves, even if that means they have to do their own laundry and solve their own problems. If this story touched something in you, if you recognize yourself in my journey or see someone you love in my struggles, please share it. Like this video and subscribe so we can reach other people who need to know they're not alone in learning to value themselves. Sometimes the cruelest gifts lead to the greatest transformations. Sometimes what breaks us also sets us free. I'm Vivian, and I'm 73 years old, and I'm finally, fully, unapologetically myself. And it's beautiful.